Okay. And we'll get rid of these when we're done. We're not gonna be circulating around the law scale.
Alright. My name is Barnabas Jones with the Lexington Court Reporters Group, a member of the National Court Reporters Association. My business address is 606 West Main Street, Suite 130, Lexington, Kentucky, 40502. This deposition is taking place on April 7th, 8th, at 11 a.m. in the jury room at the University of Kentucky College of Law for the case of Monroe v. Dawson and Copymaster Corporation. Before I swear in the deponent, would each person present please state his or her identity to the camera.
Tyler Maston for the plaintiff.
Eric Bronco, plaintiff.
Nick Hammond, counsel for the plaintiff, Melissa Monroe.
Pat Spinner, Human Resources Manager, Copymaster.
Nathan Goins, defendant.
Sarah Tipton, defendant.
Ryan Stith, defendant. At this time, I'd like to swear the deponent in. Ms. Spinner, please raise your right hand. You swear that the testimony you're about to give us is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may proceed.
Okay, before we begin, both parties have stipulated that all objections, except those as to form and foundation, have been preserved until trial. Again, can you state your full name for the record?
Pat Spinner.
Okay. Again, my name is Nick Hammond. I represent Melissa Monroe, who's brought a sexual harassment and retaliation claim against Eric Dawson and Copymaster Corporation. Are you aware of the civil suit?
I am.
Okay. And have you ever been deposed before?
I have not.
To start, just to go over some of the ground rules, we need to cover these because we have a court reporter here who's videotaping this. The first rule is that I have to finish my question before you answer so the reporter can type it down and so we can get your response on video. I need to say my full question, and in turn, I'll wait until you finish your answer before I ask my next question. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. It's also important that you answer verbally since the reporter has to hear your responses. We may get into a conversational mode today. You may want to shake your head or say uh-huh or uh-uh. It's important that you say yes or no if you feel like that's the appropriate way to respond. Understood?
That's fine.
The most important rule is that if you don't understand one of my questions, just ask me to rephrase my question. Because if you answer, I'm going to assume that you understood the question and that you testified truthfully. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. Is there any reason such as being under unusual stress, a physical or mental condition, or being under the influence of any kind of substance that would prevent you or limit you today from giving truthful answers to my questions? Again, if you need a break at any point, please just ask. Finally, please remember that you are under oath, just as if you were up on a witness stand.
Okay.
A little background information. Where did you receive your bachelor's degree?
I received my bachelor's from Moots. No, I received my bachelor's from the University of Illinois.
And what was that degree?
That degree was a bachelor's of music with an emphasis in administration.
And what other degrees do you hold?
I also have a master's degree from Moot State University. That's in business administration, and my concentration was human resources and labor relations.
Have you written any works in the field that may have been published?
No.
Was Copymaster your first job in the field of human resources?
No.
Okay. Where else have you worked?
I have also worked at Copies Are We, which is another major player industry and a competitor of Copymaster.
Were you a manager in that position, or were you working under someone else?
I worked in the human resources department.
How many years have you been an HR manager?
Over 10.
And how long of that was at Copymaster?
Less than 1 year.
Okay.
Before the incident.
I want to just briefly ask you about some of the internal policies at Copymaster. To your knowledge, does Copymaster allow employees to take personal leave of absence?
I am not aware of that policy.
Have you ever taken a leave of absence?
I have not.
To your knowledge, do you have to provide an explanation for a leave?
I'm not aware of that policy.
So I want to talk to you about some of the events that unfolded while Melissa Monroe was employed at Copymaster from January of 2009 to February of 2010. Do you recall Melissa Monroe approaching you outside work in the Copy Master parking lot? This would have been either June or July of 2009.
I do.
Okay. In your counsel's response to our complaint, it was denied in paragraph 16 that that event took place. Was that denial made in error, you believe?
I do not recall if we had that interaction or not, to be honest.
So your previous answer, was that you did not see her?
I did not see her in the parking lot. My apologies.
Okay. On January 15th of 2010, following a conference between Ms. Monroe and Mr. Dawson, Ms. Monroe came to you and made a formal complaint regarding sexual harassment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you made an audio recording of the statements made by Ms. Monroe during that meeting. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you still have a copy of this recording?
I do not.
Would you typically keep the recordings of employee statements?
It depends on the situation, but if they've been transcribed, they're not always kept.
Did you transcribe this?
It was transcribed into the memo, the written investigation.
Her testimony was?
Not word for word. The notes were taken in the memo, the written.
So it wasn't really a transcription, is that fair to say?
That's fair.
But you didn't keep this audio recording of the meeting with Melissa Monroe, is that correct?
I do not have it at this time.
But part of your job is to keep record of employee information and complaints. Would you agree?
I agree.
How would you describe Ms. Monroe's demeanor when she came into your office following her year-end evaluation with Eric Dawson?
She was very upset.
Part of your duties in the investigation of Ms. Monroe's claim included interviewing witnesses. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In the course of your investigation of Melissa Monroe's claim for sexual harassment at Copymaster, did you at any point receive confirmation that Derek Dawson made physical contact of any kind with Melissa Monroe?
I did not.
In Derek Dawson's deposition taken on March 9th, he acknowledged that he put his hands on Melissa Monroe's shoulders following a performance review. Is that inconsistent with what you were told by Mr. Dawson or anyone other than Ms. Monroe?
That is not inconsistent. Those I spoke to related to Ms. Monroe did not see that occur.
So to clarify, you never heard anyone say that you made physical contact with her, or you did? That's okay.
I don't know. Just making sure I didn't know.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Plaintiffs Exhibit 1. This is the Copymaster Corporation Employee Handbook, which describes the work environment as adopted on December 1st, 2009. Are you familiar with this document?
I am.
And does this look like a fair and accurate copy of that portion of the Employee Handbook?
It is, however, it's a draft.
But this was the version of the handbook in effect when you handled the claim of sexual harassment. Is that correct?
No, it was not the governing policy. That is a draft.
Then what is the governing policy?
The governing policy is the one that was adopted in 2002.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Plaintiffs Exhibit 2. This is the investigative report concerning Melissa Monroe's allegation of sexual harassment created on February 2nd, 2010. Did you create this document?
Yes, I did.
And does this look like a fair and accurate copy of your report?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I want to direct your attention to the last line of your report. Where you stated, quote, absent clear and convincing evidence to support her claim, I am not inclined to take the word of an apparently marginal new employee over that of a 14-year regional manager and proven performer, end quote. Do you see where you wrote that?
I do.
You say absent clear and convincing evidence. Is it fair to call that the evidentiary standard you applied in investigating Ms. Monroe's claim?
I don't know what invented. Please rephrase your question.
Is that the standard in which you looked at the evidence that you received? And your interpretation was that the evidence was not clear and convincing?
That's correct.
Okay. But that required standard is not specifically stated anywhere in the Copymaster Employee Handbook. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Looking at the last line of your report, part of your determination of the credibility of Melissa Monroe's claim, you based in part that determination on your opinion that she was, quote, a marginal employee. Is that correct?
I based my information on the evidence that I received.
Okay. But you based your determination as to whether her claims were credible in part on her sales figures. Is that what you refer to as a marginal employee? Is that what you're referring to?
That's not what I based my evidence on. The evidence was just based on the investigation here.
Then what did you mean by marginal employee?
I do not know.
Then also as part of your determination, you took into account the amount of time both Ms. Monroe and Derek Dawson had worked at Copymaster. Isn't that correct?
I noted that in the notes, yes.
How long had you worked alongside Derek Dawson?
I had worked alongside Derek Dawson for less than a year.
Okay. And in the current Copymaster Employee Handbook, which is the Exhibit 1, the very first line says, quote, all employees are entitled to a work environment free of discrimination, free of harassment, end quote. All employees would encompass marginal employees, would it not?
Correct.
And that all employees would encompass those that have been there a short amount of time, correct?
Correct.
Is it common practice for employers to take measures to limit or eliminate contact between the complainant and the accused in sexual harassment claims, at least until the investigation has concluded?
It depends on their positions in the organization.
But in this organization, Derek Dawson and Melissa Monroe were working side by side. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But Derek Dawson was not separated from Melissa Monroe in this instance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Was that option ever considered in this case?
That wasn't under the policy.
And how long did it take you to conclude your investigation?
It took just under 3 weeks.
In your report, you summarized the testimony of 4 individuals. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Does the report reflect the entirety of your investigation?
It does.
And one of those 4 witnesses was the accused harasser. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
How many people work in the office with Dawson and Monroe?
I do not know.
Are you aware that Copymaster employs 1,500 people total? Does that sound correct?
That sounds correct.
So you did 4 out of 1,500 employees. You interviewed for 1,500 that made it in your report?
Correct.
So that would be 1 out of 375 employees.
Correct.
Okay, I want to jump to the portion of your report concerning the company holiday party.
Okay.
One of the individuals, a Copymaster employee, testified to seeing Mr. Dawson pressed up against Monroe at the party. Is that correct?
I'm going to object to that. It's the form of the question.
The instructor is still answer.
Yeah, she can still answer it, but would you mind rephrasing it?
Yeah. In your report, there is...
You specify in the report
Yeah.
where it is.
It's the last paragraph on the first page.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, so in your report, you had interviewed an unnamed employee who testified to seeing Melissa Monroe and Derek Dawson at the holiday party. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
Okay. But he did not hear what was said between them. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
To your knowledge, was he watching Derek Dawson and Melissa Monroe for the entirety of the party?
I do not know.
Were you at this party?
I was not.
Were you aware if alcohol was served at this party?
I do not know.
So from this witness, you received confirmation that at the very least, physical contact was made. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
He did not say he saw.
He did not. That is not the last paragraph on the first page of my report.
Okay.
The last paragraph of the first page of my report is part of Monroe's
I think
investigation.
it's the second page.
Yeah, might be the second page.
Yeah, it's the second.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's the last paragraph on the second page continuing onto the third page. So looking at that paragraph, again, I apologize. But from that witness and what you have in your report, did he confirm that there was physical contact between Derek Dawson and Melissa Monroe? Did he say that in there?
It says standing up against, which I may or may not confirm it's physical contact.
Okay. So then which part of his statements made you conclude that there was no basis to her claim, but only his statements alone?
He did not see Melissa Monroe to be in any distress, and he did not see Dawson perform the same physical contact that Monroe stated in her claim.
When you do an investigation and interview workers, as you did here, is it common practice to not include the names of those witnesses?
It depends on the situation.
Can you expand on that?
Some witnesses don't want their names included.
So is it up to them, or is it your own decision?
It depends on the situation.
So Peg Mead, she was not anonymous in this report. Would that be because she said she did not want to be anonymous?
That is correct.
Okay. What is Copymaster's position in regards to dating or relationships among employees?
We do not have a policy in front of us at that time.
And what about managers and employees not in management? Is there a policy for that?
I don't have that policy in front of me at this time.
Well, to the best of your knowledge, your recollection, not necessarily in front of
I
you.
do not recall.
Were you ever made aware that Peg Mead and Derek Dawson had an ongoing sexual relationship?
No.
Objection to form. You can still answer.
Your answer was no.
No.
In your report and reaching your conclusion in that report, you seem to weigh pretty heavily the fact that Peg Mead, a close friend, did not know anything about Melissa Monroe's harassment. Is it accurate to say that fact was emphasized in your report? It's in your conclusion.
It was in my conclusion, but it wasn't weighed any more heavily than any other person's.
But you did give credence to it. You did give some weight to it. It was considered.
Of course, everyone I spoke to was given consideration.
In Peg Mead's deposition on March 4th, she testified that Melissa Monroe did not mention her claims of harassment to her because Melissa knew Peg Mead had been in a relationship with Derek Dawson. Are you aware that that was the case?
I was not.
In your time as Copymaster HR manager, have you handled any other instances of sexual harassment involving Derek Dawson and female employees other than Melissa Monroe?
Not during my time there, no.
When you started as the HR manager, were you given personnel files on current employees?
I have access to personnel files on all employees.
And that information would include any investigations made by the former HR manager, Carol Rule,
That is correct.
and anyone who came before her.
That is correct.
So then you're aware that Derek Dawson had received 2 other sexual harassment complaints from former women working at Copymaster in the late 90s, shortly after he was promoted to regional sales manager.
I am only aware of one complaint, and that was in 1999.
Okay. So did you not consider that reprimand relevant to your investigation?
I did not. I was 10 years old and not part of the current investigation.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Plaintiffs Exhibit 3. This is the official reprimand given to Derek Dawson by Carol Rule in June of 1999. It says that Derek Dawson pressed his body up against a female employee. It also says that he made inappropriate verbal comments by telling her he can help her career if she loosened up a little. He He also advised that, quote, the company will not tolerate conduct of this sort and that further violations may result in your termination. Would you agree that the actions of Derek Dawson written here are nearly identical to what Melissa Monroe has alleged happened to her?
I'm gonna object to that. Can still answer.
I would not agree.
Would you agree that they're similar?
They are similar.
As part of your job in assessing workplace behavior, are past reprimands typically waived?
No.
Then what's the purpose of keeping them on file?
I'll rephrase my earlier statement. It depends on when the reprimands were made. Reprimands that are over 10 years old are not considered
Then why is it still in the file?
because of the retention of records policy.
I want to go back to the Copymaster Employee Handbook, which was Exhibit 1. May need to. In the second paragraph of that Employee Handbook, which is a draft, it says, quote, at the conclusion of the investigation, a complete report including findings and recommended outcomes should be made and presented to the Vice President for Personnel. You see where it says that?
I do.
In this instance, did you present your findings to the Vice President?
I did not. This was not the governing policy at that time.
So he never made any kind of determination as you report?
No.
Was he made aware that there were any kind of claims of harassment within the workplace?
I do not recall.
In your opinion, why do you think this was added in this draft? The adding, the presenting the findings to the Vice President. Why do you think that's in the 2010 version and not the 2002 version? What's the purpose?
I was not involved in writing this draft.
Well, just as a normal matter, in your opinion, what do you think that does, in effect?
I still was not involved in writing this draft.
Would you say that this provision acts as a safeguard against potential bias and potential impropriety that could occur when there's only one individual, one acting investigator?
Do I respond?
Yeah, you can respond. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to object to that question.
I will not state, I was not involved in writing this draft policy.
And if we were to adopt the 2010 draft, isn't it true that you alone would no longer be authorized to discipline employees?
That is true.
Looking at the third paragraph on the last page, it says, quote, once the president is convinced that the investigation is complete and satisfactory, it will be deemed closed. You see where it says that?
It says Vice President, yes.
Oh, excuse me, Vice President. Taking into account the fact that you did not present your findings to Vice President, can you say that your investigation report regarding Melissa Monroe's sexual harassment claims is complete?
It is complete. I was acting under the governing policy at that time.
So you'd also say that it's satisfactory.
It is satisfactory.
And Ms. Monroe was fired around 2 weeks after you had completed the report, is that correct?
That is correct.
And I want to show you what I've marked as Plaintiffs Exhibit 4. That's the draft from as adopted on April 2nd, 2010. Are you familiar with that document?
I am.
And does it look like an accurate copy of the 2010 version of the handbook?
It is.
The last line is changed from the previous version. It now says all employees are on notice that they may be subject to appropriate discipline up to and including termination if they are found to have violated the policy. Do you see where it says that?
I do.
Pursuant to this language, would firing Eric Dawson back in 1999 when he was reprimanded for sexual harassment, would that have been an appropriate action under that language?
That was not.
Objection. Go ahead.
That was not the governing policy when he was reprimanded in 1999.
The added language in the 2010 version, was this intended to, in your opinion, increase the severity of punishment for workplace violations?
Again, I wasn't involved in writing this policy.
I think that's all that I have.
I've got a few questions to follow up, but would you like to take a break or anything before?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to be going through some of the same things that you went through, but I'm going to have a little different, a few different things I want to point out.
Okay.
So sorry to be repetitive. Already stated your personal background and your name, so we don't need to do that. Could you state again what your education background is as far as your undergraduate degree and your master's?
Bachelor's degree at the University of Illinois. My master's was at Moot State University in Business Administration. I have an emphasis in human resources and labor relations.
Okay. Outside of what we've talked about as far as your experience in industry, do you have any other experience in the HR realm of?
I'm also a senior certified professional in human resources.
Are you a part of any other professional organizations or any other organizations of membership involving human resources?
The
or anything?
Society of Human Resources Management.
Okay. Let's see here. So you said you were certified under which one of those?
It's through the Society of Human Resources Management, and it's a senior certified professional.
Great. Okay. Have you ever testified before in a litigation at all, civil or criminal or anything
I have
like
not.
that? You never testified. I wanted to ask you also, as far as your employment at CMC, you mentioned that you had done human resources investigations there before?
Not at CMC, no.
Had you done any other positions that you've had?
I have.
You have? And have you been questioned as far as whether or not those investigations were accurate and complete?
I have not.
Okay. Are you being paid in any way to testify here today
I am
or at
not.
the trial later? No? Okay. I wanted to go ahead and introduce what has been marked, if you don't care, I'm going to use this, that's okay. What has been marked as Exhibit 1 to be attached to Pat Spinner's deposition. If you want to look at it. This is going to be the policy of CMC that was effective as of the date of the investigation that was conducted for Ms. Monroe's claims.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Do you believe that you have followed that policy that was in effect whenever you conducted this investigation?
I did follow that policy.
And whose discretion is it under in that policy to determine whether or not there has been any sexual harassment?
It's the Human Resources Manager, which was me at that time.
Okay, so it was in your total discretion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We had talked about whether or not there had been physical contact during, or whether or not you uncovered any physical contact between Ms. Monroe and Eric Dawson at the Christmas party. It was safe to say that you said that it was unclear whether or not there had been any contact.
That is correct.
And is it uncommon for you to, as being an HR manager, have you had any other claims that placing the hands on someone's shoulder has been any form of sexual harassment in the past?
Check the phone.
I do not recall.
You don't recall. Okay. In your own experience, has anyone ever placed their hands on your shoulders at work?
Check the phone.
I have not.
The draft policy that we had I just showed you, that was effective. Do you recall when it was the effective date of that policy?
The adopted policy or the
No,
draft policy?
the policy that was in effect, the one that we just introduced.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Do you know?
please?
Can you recall when it was effective? The dates that was effective?
It was adopted in 2002, and it was effective until the new policy was adopted in April of 2010.
Okay, great. And that standard used in your experience is a standard that was used at CMC. Is it like other standards that you had experienced as an HR manager?
It is.
Is there any glaring differences that you would point out if you had to draft a policy, or anything that's missing from that?
I did not find any glaring differences.
Let's see. Okay. So we've established that you've conducted investigations before in your past. What are some things that you look for during an investigation of this type to consider whether or not there had been sexual harassment?
I listen to what people have told me, especially with witnesses, to see if there's similarities between their recollections of the event.
Okay. So based upon your course of action when you do these investigations, it's safe to say, or would you say that there were no signs of sexual harassment based on this investigation?
I would agree with that.
How confident are you with that assessment?
Very confident.
Okay. Is there any reason at all that you feel like you shouldn't be confident with that?
There is no reason not to be confident.
Okay, in your expert opinion, based upon your experience and your education, do you feel like there was a hostile work environment created for Ms. Monroe based upon her allegations against Eric Dawson?
I cannot say whether it was hostile for her or not.
Okay. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it's good for me. I'm finished.
I've got a few follow-ups. Okay, we looked at the 2002 employee handbook. That's what your attorney just introduced. So there's two drafts that came out after that. Why were they never adopted? Do you know?
I do not know.
Can it be interpreted that those are the current intentions of the company?
It cannot.
Objection.
What do you know what the purpose of creating a draft that is not then adopted within the company?
It was just never finalized. Seemed to be not a good draft. I was not working there at that point in time, so I don't have any more information.
Have you ever had any interactions with Eric Dawson outside of the workplace?
I have.
In what ways?
We were friends in college.
You were friends in college. So how long have you known Derek Dawson?
Over 14 years.
And how long have you known Melissa Monroe?
Since she started working at Copy Master, so about 14 months.
Peg Mead described Derek Dawson in her deposition as a womanizer. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do not agree.
Going back to your report, there were only 2 witnesses in the report other than the accused and the accuser. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's all the questions that I have. Are you finished, Nathan?
I wanted to introduce one more thing, if you don't mind. Sorry. Just basically wanted to introduce this in evidence, what's been marked as Exhibit B, attached to this deposition. It's just her CV and resume. And that's it.
The video transcript of your deposition will be made available. Please review it with your counsel. If you need to make any changes, I believe you already have a number. If you need to, contact me about it.
And I've got a card for you as well. Thanks.
All right, this concludes the deposition of Pat Spinner for the case of Monroe v. Dawson and Copy Master Corporation.